Right, I'd like to welcome everyone here today. We've told people that we're going to work really hard at finishing this by about 10 or 9:15, so we're going to start very close to on time. So welcome to everyone. It's great that we've got such a crowd here, and the reason we're having the meeting is that I was of the view that the process around amalgamation proposals was not that clear. The issues were not that clear, and what we're doing is providing an opportunity for people to have a listen, to ask their questions, and right at the end to have their say. But we do have people from both sides. You've seen, I think, already circulating around some bits of paper and a box to write questions on. And what we're going to try and do is to avoid having the same question asked half a dozen times by different people. So people will write their questions down. It's going to be the job of my colleague Chris Hipkins, who's over there, to amalgamate the questions and to try and not repeat the questions. First set of questions will go to the Local Government Commission. We've got here Emma Taylor from the Commission. She will make a presentation for about 10 to 15 minutes. Can I ask that, there will be stuff in there that people disagree with, but Emma's had to step in at the very last minute for the Chief Executive of the Commission, who has an extremely ill family member suddenly today. And so Emma stepped in, and what I just ask is for her to be heard with respect. Questions to her written down through Chris, and then after that we're going to have a debate. We've got some people here who are quite strongly supportive of the amalgamation. We've got Derek Wiltshire, who's formerly the chair of the Eastbourne Community Board and long-time Eastbourne resident and activist, might say. Nick Kelly, the Mayor of Pororua, and Fran Wild, who's chair of the Wellington. Sorry? What's that for you? Oh, Kelly, God almighty. I have done that before. That is one of the worst things I could do. I apologise. I withdraw and apologise even. Sorry. And I did write it down too. And Fran Wild, who's chair of the Wellington Regional Council. We have a group of people who are as strongly opposed to the proposal. We've got Chris Mackay, who is a local Hutt business person. We have Wayne Guppy, the Mayor of Lower Hutt. And Ray's getting a bit anxious about what might happen. And Ray was the Mayor of Upper Hutt. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through that group. They're each going to have 5 minutes, and that's going to be very strict. There's going to be a ding with 30 seconds to go, and then an alarm will go off, and that will be the end. That will be the end of their speech. There's an opportunity then to have questions for them. Same group, written down, amalgamated, so that we don't have the same question over and over again. And then for about the last 20 minutes, what we're going to do is invite people to give their opinion for 1 minute each from the microphone down the back. So that if people want to have a say, that is the opportunity to do it. So, getting started, what I'd like to do is to welcome Emma Taylor from the Local Government Commission, and it's her job to outline the proposal and the process. Emma.
Thanks very much for having me here tonight. As Trevor introduced, I'm Emma Taylor. I'm the lead advisor for the Local Government Commission on the Wellington proposal. And give my apologies from Sandra Preston, who's our Chief Executive. She was unexpectedly taken to Christchurch to deal with family illness today. I'm going to give you a presentation outlining the Wellington proposal, just to perceive the debate that will happen. So just an outline of the presentation I'll give. And just to clarify that the Commission's role tonight is to provide information about the proposal and the process. Just starting off to clarify the role of the Commission. The Commission was established in 1947. We're actually a permanent commission of inquiry into local government functions, i.e. the structure of local government in New Zealand. We have 3 commissioners, Basil Morrison, Janie Anea and Anne Carter, and the commissioners are supported by a small team of staff and we're housed at the Department of Internal Affairs. We're an independent agency making those decisions around, the commissioners making the decisions around local government at arm's length from central government and the councils themselves. Okay, just a bit of background about how the Commission became involved in what's been quite a long-running process. There were applications in from the 3 Wairarapa councils, and they wanted to create a unitary authority for the Wairarapa. So that would be combining those 3 councils and taking on the functions of the regional council in the Wairarapa area. So that would mean 1 council doing the work previously done by 4 councils in the Wairarapa area. The Wellington Regional Council also put in an application, and they asked for a single unitary authority which covered the whole Wellington region. So 1 council doing all the work previously done by 9 councils in the region. As a result of those applications, the Commission then goes through its process and it called for alternative applications. Several territorial authorities, including both Hutt and Upper Hutt, submitted proposals based on different models. The Commission went through quite a process of consultation with the community, with councils, with iwi, farmers, key groups in the region before it came up with its view on what it saw as the best proposal going forward, which it has released in December as the draft proposal. So just a little bit about how the law kind of sets up the Commission and its work around the process. So the Commission is required to find the option that best promotes good local government, and that is defined as including being able to meet future needs, providing efficient infrastructure and services, and enabling democratic local decision making. The other part of the key test there is the option which will facilitate improved economic performance, and that can include efficiencies, cost savings, productivity improvements, and simplified planning processes. Now, the legislation sets out the matters that the Commission must be satisfied about. That includes necessary resources, having an appropriate district and so on. The Commission has had all of these matters in the front of its mind when it's been considering all the options and looking at the best way forward for the structure of local government in Wellington. It considered a whole range of options, including status quo, keeping the current 9 councils, a modified status quo, merging some councils and keeping the regional council, and also a unitary authority for Wairarapa, which will be a single council for the Wairarapa, including a regional council for the Wairarapa, and all unitary authorities in other areas. And the Commission also looked at 1 unitary authority for the whole region, with or without local boards. So coming to the draft proposal, hopefully those of you who are interested in the fine detail about the proposal have had a chance to read it. There is a plain English summary which runs to about 50 pages. I know, 50 pages. The actual technical report, for those who really want to get into the detail, that runs to about 300 pages. So I guess that gives you an indication that there's a lot of matters at hand that the Commission has thought about really carefully and taken into account a lot of information, and it's tried to provide that in a way that is accessible to people. So there's also been a pamphlet which has been provided through libraries and to all households in the region. Overview of the proposed new council. It's called Greater Wellington Council, with a shared decision-making structure, 1 mayor and 21 councillors for the Wellington-Wairarapa region. The mayor and councillors will be known as the governing body, so they are responsible for high-level matters affecting the whole region, and they share decisions with 8 local boards. And the local boards will be a formal part of the council structure, and they will be responsible for matters affecting local communities. So I know the local boards are something that people are quite keen on talking a bit more about, so I'll just give a little bit more detail about that. So the local boards will be responsible for local decision making. They'll be based in each community with their own agreed budgets and powers. The Act it gives some decisions to the governing bodies, such as things like regulation, transport, infrastructure, and some matters to local boards. The Commission would make what's called a starting allocation of decision making to the governing body and the local boards, and it can recommend further decision making be delegated to local boards. So the way in which that happens is actually set out in the legislation. The Commission doesn't have the power to set the delegations for regulatory decision making. That power would rest with the governing body itself. It is, however, intended that Wellington local boards would be more integrated within the council and may have a broader role than the Auckland model. So the Commission has looked at the proposal in Auckland and has drawn some conclusions about what it thinks is working well and not so well, and proposed a different model, a slightly varied model from Wellington. And in the Commission's report, it has made some recommendations on the delegations that it thinks should go to the local boards, including roading, so rural roads, walking, cycling paths, tracks, solid waste, so local collection services, transfer facilities, recycling services. In terms of the Resource Management Act, it suggests that input into notification decisions for resource consent applications would have a role there within the delegations for the local boards. Also, within a regional framework, policies and bylaws on things like dog control, stock control, liquor and gambling. The appointment of local emergency management committees would also fall within board delegations, and some aspects of economic development, like running particular events and initiatives, Main Street programs and so on, within the regional policies. Perhaps by giving an example, just of one that's relevant here to the Hutt. There are two Hutt Valley local boards proposed that would provide the local voices for how local services would be run in this area. The Dow's Museum, or the Expressions Entertainment Centre in Upper Hutt, would be run by the relevant local board, and it would oversee matters such as its hours, usage and performance, and the same would apply for the local sports fields in this area. In terms of new facilities, those would be prioritised and approved by the governing body. Once they've been approved and up and running, the local board would approve the design and location and operation of those facilities once they've been approved. So just going forward into some key reasons about why this is the proposal the Commission has come out with is the one that sees as the best way forward. The Commission's election consulted really widely before making decisions on the draft proposal. There were a number of recurring themes from around the region, and they had to follow some of those specific tests set out in legislation which set out the expectations for what councils need to do. Key reasons given by the Commission for the proposal that they've put forward: that there are some weaknesses in the ability of current structures to make decisions where a cohesive regional approach is needed. Examples here might be planning, roading and water networks. There are some future challenges for all councils which are regional in scale and require a regional response. Like the whole region needs investment in public transport and ageing infrastructure like pipes over the coming decades. Other challenges relate to ageing and declining populations in some areas, natural hazards and the need for coordinated economic development. And just turning to the public submission process. As I outlined, the proposal did come from the community and ultimately will be decided by the community if in fact there is a referendum. I really strongly encourage you to put submissions in. Submissions close at 2nd of March, that's next Monday. We're really interested in hearing from people's views, whether you support or oppose the proposal, what you see as alternatives, what you like and don't like about it. The more information we get, the more informed we are about community views, and that will help the commissioners to make their decision. You can use the submission form. There's several ones available from councils or from the commission, or you can use any form you like. Just an email or a letter is fine. And we're looking to hold public hearings sometime later in March for those people who actually wish to be heard to their submissions, and that will be face-to-face with the commissioners, so you have an opportunity to speak to them directly and for them to ask you questions about your submission. Some of you might be interested in the number of submissions to date. As of today, there's about 1,600 submissions, so we're expecting a few more to roll in for next Monday. Okay, so after the public hearings, the Commission has some decisions to make. It's got a few options. It can decide to modify the proposal or keep it as is, or issue a final version without any further sort of submission process. Or it could decide that a new option is called for and issue a new draft and call for a new round of public submissions. Or it could simply stop the process and decide that status quo should prevail. So one point I just want to be really clear on is the Commission can only issue a final proposal if it is satisfied there's demonstrable community support in the district of each affected territorial authority. Okay, we've also had a number of questions, people wanting to understand about a poll or a referendum, so I just thought I'd run through that as well. Essentially, it's too soon yet to be thinking about a referendum. It can only be triggered by a final proposal. And what we're consulting on at the moment is a draft proposal. But a poll or a referendum will be held if there's a final proposal issued and 10% of electors in any affected council area sign a petition. For example, in one of the smallest councils, Carterton, there are about 6,500 electors, so 650 valid signatures would be needed for a petition from this area. There's more than 10 times that in Lower Hutt, 70,000. The signatures are then to be collected within 60 working days, about 3 months of release of the final proposal.
Can you repeat that a little bit again, please? Go back about 2 minutes, or 1 minute, sorry.
So, in order to trigger a referendum, there needs to be a final proposal, and then there would need to be a poll signed by 10% of the affected electors in any given district of the region. So Carterton is the smallest, so in Carterton, 650 valid signatures from electors would be sufficient to trigger a poll, which would be held by all of Wellington. Everyone in Wellington would get a chance to vote. And that poll would be binding as well. And just to wrap up, as many of you are aware, and it's great to see people coming out on a Monday evening, this is a really important proposal. This sort of proposal, this sort of opportunity doesn't come along that often. It's been sort of back to 1989 that the last significant changes were made to the structure of local government in New Zealand. Around 23 local authorities in the region were dissolved at that time, and in their place 9 councils were created, and many boroughs and county councils were absorbed into the district and city councils we've got today. Many of you will recall that Petone, Eastbourne and Wainui Mata Borough councils were combined here in the Hutt Valley. So this is really important. Really encourage you to get your submissions in and make sure that you tell the commissioners what your views are about the proposal. That's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, while Emma's been talking, Chris Hipkins has been working his way through the pile of questions. I just want to remind people that we're taking questions in writing, and Chris is putting them together to try and get a bit of a logical flow from them. He's been doing that, so he'll ask your questions now, and Emma will respond for up to about 10 minutes in this area.
All right, and I don't know if this is working. What's that?
Yes, Mike?
Is it working?
No.
I might just have to... Oh, there we go. Now it's working. So just to be clear for people, I've separated the questions that ask for an opinion, which I'll save for later on when we're hearing from the proponents and the opponents. So the questions that I'm going to put now to the Commission only relate to matters of fact or clarification, and we'll get on to the debate a bit later on. So the first question is, what defines demonstrable support?
That's probably a time I actually have been in my position in the Commission for only 3 weeks. So in terms of technical matters, I'm going to ask for support from Don Mackay, who's a senior advisor at the Commission who knows the legislation in more detail than I do.
Thank you. Yeah, good question. And in reality, it's going to come down to a judgment call by the Commissioners, because the Act specifies that demonstrable community support doesn't necessarily mean majority support, but clearly community support is something bigger than just a small number of people supporting. So, yeah, the Commissioners are going to have to think rather hard and make a judgment call on that, because there is no magic number in the legislation.
Thank you. And while we're on questions about the legalities of it, would the referendum be binding?
Yes, that's correct. The referendum would be binding.
Thank you. The next question is, what alternatives to council reorganisation did the Commission consider to solve the identified or perceived problems?
Alternatives to reorganisation.
Well, I didn't write the questions, but yes, I assume that's...
Okay. The Commission's job under the law is solely about structures. So potential solutions to issues which are about funding, for instance, or something else, are simply beyond the Commission's mandate. So, yeah.
Thank you. Has a financial statement been published of the benefits of amalgamation as opposed to not amalgamating, and if so, where can the public access that?
So the Commission got quite a lot of information and input in making its proposal, and in the proposal document there is information in there based on reports we've had from consultants about the cost savings, transition costs, and those other sorts of financial elements in the decision.
Thank you. Should a referendum be held, would only ratepayers be eligible to vote, or would all residents living in the affected areas be able to vote?
It's all electors, everybody who's on the electoral roll, and part of the reason why there is a relatively long lead time before a poll is actually held is to give time for local authority electoral officers to refresh the electoral rolls and make sure people who are not on have an opportunity to get on.
Thank you. And the final question that I have relating to this section, because as I said, I'm saving the questions relating for opinion for next. In the mailed out proposal dated in December, it mentions 8 areas known as wards. Can you please explain what the definition of a ward is?
A subdivision of a district for electoral purposes. In the context of the model the Commission has proposed, the wards would operate in much the same way as the current wards. I think Hutt City has wards now. It's the same beastie at larger scale.
Can I thank Emma very much and your team for coming along and doing that presentation. I think we're now going to get on to the bit which might be slightly more exciting and controversial and a bit more debate. So we have 2 teams. They are going to alternate. We're going to start by inviting the team who are supportive of the amalgamation proposals to show us your faces and to come to the table and to invite Derek Wiltshire to start, and a reminder that they are absolutely strictly limited to 5 minutes, and we're going to encourage them to stop after 4.5. Derek.
Thank you, Trevor. And kia ora. Hands off the hut. Hands off the hut indeed. But who wants the hut? It's not just about the hut. It's about a better hut and a better Wellington. I love the hut. Have lived here for more than 60 years, was educated here and represented Hutt in several sports. I've been 46 years an observer of resource management and local government as a professional, a committee member of regional bodies including the Wellington Regional Council and the Wairarapa Catchment Board. 9 years as chairman on the Eastbourne Community Board, 6 years as chair or deputy chair. From this experience, I've developed very strong views about the best direction of the future development of Wellington. I'm a member of Better Hutt Valley, an independent, non-aligned group that strongly supports the local government commission draft proposal. We observed that it is a well-researched and presented proposal, rigorously analyses the region, the various options presented, and its own legal constraints before making its recommendation. A single unitary council would govern a better region with members elected to manage regional activities, including full responsibility for the Resource Management Act, regional transport, environment, including recognition of climate change, the 3 waters, natural water, waste water, and stormwater and flooding, overall infrastructure, flood protection and roading, housing, industry, major recreational facilities, response and anticipation of climate change and natural disasters, economic and cultural development, regional park networks. A spatial plan would recognise these over the region. All this requires a critical mass of capability and competence. to be effective. The major catchments and network catchments of the region feed into Wellington City and the harbour, and the rest marginally do so. Anything less, including suggestions of 3 unitary authorities, make no sense at all when managing these things for most of the population. The current arrangements with some shared services, which are a political artifice, stem from an historical disputational mayoral forum and fail the democratic test of election and direct accountability to perform these functions. A better Hutt would see the local boards in the Hutt Valley wisely with current boundaries, retaining our community's history and sense of place. I have not seen any compelling appetite for an Upper and Lower Hutt merger, particularly from Upper Hutt. The local boards must prepare a local plan for their mandated activities consistent with the superior spatial plan and manage its implementation. This will be a very fulfilling responsibility, not low-key as has been suggested by some. This local plan, broadly equivalent to the current 10-year and annual plans, and funding would be provided to the boards based on these plans in an annual bidding process. The draft proposals, constrained by the Local Government Act, to 2 tiers of governance, but there is provision for the establishment of local community committees, broadly equivalent to community boards and committees. It is inconceivable that the plans would be prepared without significant consultation input from such committees. The procedures for the Greater Council adoption of the local plans would surely test the competence of that process. Also, and not insignificantly, this would be replicated throughout our region. Much better local democracy than we have now. This process would be more democratic than the current one, where HCC has shown scant regard for the potential of the 3 elected boards and appointed committees and their plans, and council planning and projects, and indeed has sought to remove them in the last 2 representation reviews held every 6 years. We have found a strong sense in the community that some change is needed, with more information and debate required to agree the path to better local government. Therefore, whatever we think is right, even after several years and truckloads of reports, maybe it's time for our leaders to cut out the name-calling and rhetoric and frankly stop wasting our rates and collaborate to chart our future with dignity. Given that we are now enmeshed in the statutory process, I beg you, my colleagues and opponents, to recommend to your communities to submit in favour of the current proposal to ensure full and fruitful debate will ensure. I rest my case.
Right, the first speaker from the other team, Chris McKay.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I also speak to you as a son of the Hutt. I've lived in the Hutt almost 60 years. I was born and educated here. I had my business here. I've had my business here for 36 years. I've been a ratepayer since 1976. Je suis Lower Hutt. I like it that I have easy access to Hutt City councillors and the Mayor, as do all our citizens. We have 12 councillors and 1 Mayor. Under the proposals, we will have only 4 councillors representing us. Don't be fooled by this toothless local board nonsense. They are and would be a waste of time. Recently in Auckland, 21 local boards wrote to their mayor with complaints of feeling distanced, stifled and ignored. The Masterton Mayor summed it up succinctly the other day. She said the local boards, she said the Supercity will decide if we get a library, the local board will decide what colour. I like it that we have 1 elected representative for every 7,000 people in the Hutt, not 1 per 25,000 people as per the proposal. We want to keep the local in local government. If the proposal became reality, half of New Zealand would be represented by only 2 councils. Local government, my foot. I like the way our current representatives listen. They listen to the surveys regarding the Supercity folly. In 2013, 9% of Hutt Valley people and only 3% of Upper Hutt people favoured amalgamation. Last year's survey found the following: Wellington, 76% against; Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt, 80% against; Pororua, 71% against; Kapiti, 61% against; Wairarapa, 84% against. Contrast what our valley politicians are saying with what the opposition is doing and saying. Despite overwhelming opposition to amalgamation, they, like the local government commission, don't listen and won't listen. What is it about no that they don't understand? If this is the honeymoon, how will we be treated after the wedding? A Supercity would be a horrendous train wreck for local democracy. Most Wellingtonians have never ventured past Petone. Do you really think that Wellington, with 3 wards of Rongotai, Langton and O'Harriet, and the majority of the seats, 8, will have the best interests of Heratonga, Tautrapart, Nainai, Wainui, Eastbourne or Kelso, let alone Cardigan? No way. Let's look at the efficiencies of saving money. Ha ha ha. Remember the local government commission told us that it would cost $184 million? Then a week or so back they said, oh whoops, we've stuffed up. Now it's $210 million. Well, you know what? It'll be $250 million before you can blink. Would a Supercity save any money? Well, here's some actual numbers from Auckland. What they said was the new council would lose 1,200 jobs and save $100 million in wage costs. The reality, job numbers exactly the same, and the additional wage bill is up $90 million. Not only that, but the number of council officers earning $100,000 has gone up a whopping 53%. Will your rates go down? Give me a break. In fact, there will be some suburbs whose rates will go through the roof. Do you think the Supercity, with its headquarters in Wellington, will give jobs to our local contractors? At present, there are almost 300 people working in Lower Hutt, in the Lower Hutt Council, and about 120 in the Upper Hutt offices. Assuming they even keep their jobs, that's over 400 shoppers heading straight to the clutches of Lambton Key retailers, cafes and lunch bars. Is that good for Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt? No. Some other things. Deputy Mayor of Auckland, Penny Hulse, was recently quoted in the New Zealand Herald in response to a question as to how the new council was performing. She said, the Supercity is expensive, it's unwieldy and it's unfriendly to communities. There's international evidence to prove there's an observable U-shaped relationship with council size and cost effectiveness, meaning more population translates to higher expenditure per capita. Rates will increase, not decrease. Look friends, you know that bigger is not always better. Let's learn from our Commonwealth cousins across the ditch. It's been a stuff up in Queensland, it's been a stuff up in Toronto. Last time I checked, New Zealand was a democracy. Please do not be bullied by an opinionated minority. Ladies and gentlemen,
the Mayor of Pororua,
Thanks, Trevor. Kia ora tātou. I represent the opinionated minority from across the hill. So I hope that you will indulge me a little bit this evening as I seek to put the case to you as to why I think amalgamation is a good idea. And I do that as a mayor of a city of 53,000 people, so we're roughly a third of the size of the Hutt Valley. And we think it's best to face the region and be part of it. But can I say, 25 years is a very long time to wait to review something. And we've had a quarter of a century. I was at primary school at the time since we last had any serious look or change to our local government structure in the Wellington region. And I think this is a once-in-a-generation chance to have that look and to make some changes, because I don't think we've reached perfection. And I'm not content with the status quo. I think that a leader's job is always to seek to improve the way they do things for the communities that elect them. And my council has sought to ask at a sort of a principled level, what are the things that we think are really important for local government, for our community and for the Wellington region, and then look at how the structure that might fit around that. You see, it's not all about what the council looks like, it's about what the council does. That's what's actually really important. Now, I was proudly born and bred in Porirua, but I'm also a proud Wellingtonian. And since I've become mayor, I've understood that there are two really distinct parts to local government. The first is the bit we all value. It's local. It's the local decision making, the ability for us as residents to influence and shape the communities that we live in. You know, our council chamber will be filled up over a local alcohol plan, over a playground, over some, thing that's really important to a local neighbourhood. But really, do I get people talk to me about infrastructure, about economic development, about our harbour, about the management of the Wellington environment? So these two distinct parts are actually best governed separately, in my view. Now, Wellington has some issues. We, as a region, and we're an interdependent region, people from Porirua, 15% of our workforce come to the Hutt Valley every day. A huge number of our students come over here or go into Wellington. 50% of our workforce go into Wellington City. We rely on other parts of the region, and it's mutual. We're all dependent on each other. And I would actually like the ability to have more of a say on a regional sense about the local economy here, making sure that Technology Valley goes ahead and putting Purirua's support behind that. That's what this is actually about. It's not about competing against each other, as we so often do. So, on the big stuff around the region, and that's the big stuff I've mentioned: infrastructure, water, sewage, stormwater, economic development. Last year, Wellington lost 5,000 jobs, Auckland and Christchurch gained 50,000. We do have some issues facing our economy. We're one of the lowest regions in terms of productivity. We don't have a spatial plan that will actually manage and predict growth in the Wellington region. And that isn't something that a local community is going to be particularly concerned with, because they trust that that stuff's being done. It's actually not being done as well as it should. And I think the challenge is for us to recognise that local should stay local, and broadly that's what this model does in my view. In Auckland, the boards have about 25% of the budget. They're not toothless tigers, they actually have the ability to influence what goes on in their neighbourhoods, and that's the thing that we value. So, I wouldn't be selling my community down the street if I thought this was a worse model. And I put it to you like this. Within my city, we've got some of the wealthiest communities in the country and some of the lowest income. You've got Whitby and Canons Creek next to each other. How do they survive in one council? Both two really big parts of Porirua City Council. How do they survive? Because we as a council hand over neighbourhood planning and decision making and allow their distinctness to come through, and their values and their needs to be recognised at local government level. Now, I know that can work within Porirua. That can work Stokes Valley to Miramar. That can work Kapiti to Kandala. Our communities are all distinct. It doesn't matter if they're next door to each other or 25 kilometres away from each other. But they have the same things in common in terms of networked infrastructure, economic development, and ensuring we've got a strong economy for our kids into the future.
Wayne Guppy, the Mayor of Hutt.
Thank you, Trevor. First of all, can I say from the outset that I and the Upper Hutt City are not opposed to change, particularly when the outcomes are specific and compelling. I think one of the issues that's missing in this argument has been that evidence-based facts are far from being debated. I want to highlight just a couple of things so you realise the importance of what I'm talking about that our first speaker raised. And I believe that the amalgamation of councils in the Wellington region is not just a local issue for each of our cities, but it's a national issue. I say that because you heard from our earlier speaker that in reality the amalgamation of the Wellington councils will put local government of half the population into two councils. in the country. I think that raises many alarm bells, not only for our region, but for the whole country. The implication, I believe, is enormous, and so are the risks. When you extrapolate that very clearly, we can see that the whole country could be controlled by 4 or 5 councils. That's a far cry from local democracy. Remember, New Zealand also, local government New Zealand units are typically larger by international standards. I now want to go down to the local level and again highlight what was said earlier as we go into the local boards. They are absolute lame ducks. They are a stop to the to the discussion about local democracy, and I believe they are an insult to local communities. Remember, the local boards in this proposal are only guaranteed for 5 years. After that, they're likely to disappear. As we said, it's only recently that the Auckland boards wrote to the Auckland Mayor telling us they were distant, stifled and felt they were being ignored. These boards will have no power or control, so their ability to function for local communities, I believe, is nil. When you don't control the purse strings or the finances, and you have to go to Big Brother in Wellington City, cap in hand and plead for money, like we're now seeing in Auckland, much of that money is not filtering down, and local boards are having great difficulty in carrying out any of their functions. So the local boards are designed, I believe, to actually create dysfunction, and we see that happening in Auckland now. Local boards only have a reason to focus on their very local areas, and in fact, spending their money in that local area and very little else. They create a lot of noise, but with no budget control, their authority and ability to respond to their public will be non-existent. Remember, large-scale entities also, which we're seeing in Auckland, don't stay in touch with their customer base, and particularly outside their main population centres. These entities become very centralised, and we see that occurring in Auckland, and it will occur here, and the increased bureaucracy and distance from the customers gets greatly increased. One of the things that concerns me about this proposal, the local government reform, is that there is no government strategy to govern local reform. I fail to understand and are unsure as to the framework for the reform and that the local government is trying to commission. There is certainly across the country doesn't appear to be a basis or any principles for which the current reform is intended to operate. These reforms, if you look around the country, in the far north, in the Hawke's Bay here in Wellington, are all very ad hoc. We should be attacking the changes in local government in the area, I believe, of local government functions rather than size and scale. We see that already in Wellington, where many of the regional issues that we're dealing with are dealing with together in the formation of the Economic Development Agency, Civil Defence and Emergency Management, Waste Management, minimisation, all working together. We also know that roading and transport should also be done on a regional basis. I believe there is no question that regionalisation of these functions with appropriate changes to government arrangements and retention of local government ownership will improve the delivery and efficiencies for all of us in the region without having to change the local government structure. So I believe central government should be mandating the local government commission to be putting more pressure on them to amalgamate, not to be amalgamating councils, but to amalgamating their functions and some of the things that should be done regionally. Doing this will give us huge economic benefits and efficiencies. So finally, can I say, by doing that, I think we will get the desired outcomes by local government, and the local people will still have control and have input to the local issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. We're now going to hear from one of the main proponents for the change, the Honourable Sam Wild, Chair of the Greater Regional Council.
Maybe we could just listen. Thank you everyone, kia ora tātou, thanks for coming tonight. This proposal is about the future. It's not about who's going to be around any particular council table next year. It's about whether there will be jobs for our children and grandchildren and whether in fact they'll even stay in this region. Some of us have already lost them from this region and others will follow. It's instructive that in making its recommendations, the Commission focused very much on saying the regional issues are the big ones, the local stuff's going well, let's leave it pretty much as it is. And they put a lot of effort into talking about the powers and responsibilities of local boards. They said the local boards would carry out the responsibilities and powers of the new council unless the matters were regional. And they've certainly made a presumption of localness, which is what they're required to do under the law. People need to read the report. I know it's big, but if you can, look at it on the web and actually read it. There's a lot of stuff in it. The boards are going to be interesting, and I want to talk about them. Chris called them toothless. Wayne said no power or control. The local boards will not just chip in options, which is how Ray has described them publicly. The Commission noted that it's not till the final report that they can say what the powers of the local boards might be, but they have given it a lot of thought and they've given it a huge amount of detail so people would understand, and they've asked for feedback on the powers of local boards. They specifically said their proposals reflect the statutory requirements that the Local Government Act provides the boards, lessons learned from Auckland's, and in particular the Commission's view that maximum possible allocations to local boards consistent with effective decision making is desirable. So these powers would be set up from the start, and the law is such that if the boards are undertaking something they are legally required to do, or that the Commission decided they should do in the reorganisation proposal, that function will be legally protected and it cannot be removed by the Council and it must be funded. So nobody's going to be going begging cap in hand. We were interested in the Regional Council on this part of the equation because we believe the local boards are the foundation of this, and we sought some independent legal advice which confirmed indeed that the local functions decided by the Commission would be protected by law. It's called an order in council and it's part of the law. Opponents of change say the region has performed well, there's no need for it. If you don't want to believe the Local Government Commission report and Statistics New Zealand, which they quote, have a look at the last Burr report on last year's economy in the Wellington region. GDP growth, New Zealand 3.2%, Wellington 1.1%, and Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt both in negative figures. And it gets worse. GDP per capita, the same. New Zealand 1.6, Wellington 0.1, Lower and Upper Hutt in negatives. Employment growth, the same. New Zealand twice what the Wellington region is, and again the Hutt Valley in negatives. We are in trouble. This is actually serious. They are serious indicators, and we need to do something about them. Another of the drivers for change is demographic changes, and the Commission said something that everybody in New Zealand knows now. We're all getting older, all of us. And much of the population increase, they said, forecast in the Hutt Valley and Wairarapa is in people aged 65 and over, and this will in time erode the ability to pay for local services of these communities. We're all going to be on national super at some stage, some of you probably are now, and we're going to find rate increases hard to afford. Chris Mackay talked about Auckland. Well, a few numbers, and I just got these recently from the Auckland Council. 600 effective full-time staff members fewer than at amalgamation, at the same time that the Auckland population has increased by the size of an average New Zealand town. Rates predicted to go up 9% pre-amalgamation. New rates since the new Auckland Council have been under 4%, looking at 2.9% this year. Of course, some people had massive rates increases. Do you know why? Because they changed from land value to capital value. But none of the thousands of Aucklanders who got rates decreases were ever on the front of the Herald complaining. Ladies and gentlemen, this is about the future, and frankly, people will pay to help the rest of the region. The Hutt Valley itself is a beneficiary of the rest of the region now with the flood control work, about 25 million or so paid in the last 10 or 12 years by the rest of the region to Hutt Valley. This is what will happen with the regional side of the new organisation. and I am asking you to read the report before you make up your minds. This is a very detailed report, and it is a blueprint for the future, 20 or 30 years' time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fran. We're now going to move to questions.
What about Ray?
Oh, sorry, no, we're not. You can tell who I was most worried about controlling, can't you? Ray was.
Kia ora and good evening, everybody. Firstly, I want to thank Trevor, despite all those hiccups. Thank him for organising tonight's meeting, and thank each and every one of you for coming along to what is a very important issue, not only for this city, not only for this valley, but for this region. And I want to start by saying, firstly, as the Mayor of Lower Hutt, I believe that we live in the best region in this country. It is a wonderful region, and it's a wonderfully diverse region. But there's not one single voice that can represent all of us. And I want to be clear tonight, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's debate is not about change versus no change. Tonight's debate is whether or not a supercity is best for the Wellington region, whether it wants it or whether it needs it. And the affirmative team have tried to convince you that it's absolutely needed. Well, I can tell you that the information we're going to give you clearly shows it's not. I do not want, as we've heard from the speakers here on my right, for Hutt City and Lower Hutt and the Hutt Valley to be painted as stubborn, silent majority, resistant to progress. We're happy with change, as long as it's smart change. And the proposal before us for this supercity is not smart change. Proposals that are pushing the stale, one-size-fits-all, tried and failed model, they are the ones with the outmoded thinking. They are the ones that are truly resistant to true progressive change that takes people with them. And this proposal has generated so much upset amongst not only this community but in the region, it can only be described as madness. This region does not want amalgamation. The local government commissioners, and I acknowledge the team that are here today, they are the officers. The commissioners need to stop. They need to listen to the people. 80% of this valley and 75% of the region have said no change to boundaries. The commissioners need to look at the facts and they need to throw out this proposal. So I'm pleased to hear Emma say that is an option for the commissioners. You good folk have to put into submissions to make sure they throw this proposal out. Absolutely. As Nick has said, there's opportunities for improvement in this region, and I agree with them. But we support working with the mayors and Mayor Guppy, who chairs the mayoral forum, and we're doing that. We're starting to see real things happening in this region. We've looked at amalgamation or mergers with the water services, with our economic development, with our emergency management, those things that are truly regional. We are now doing on a regional basis without the need to amalgamate the councils. Despite this, the proponents of the supercity and of change keep saying that we're not working together. And I'm sorry, Jared, but this is not the case. This region works well, this council works well with its elected members, and particularly our community boards and ward committees who this week have been out collecting signatures to ensure this supercity is stopped. So let's keep that momentum going. Let's not burden the region and its residents with the high unnecessary cost. Because what hasn't been said about the Auckland region, the Auckland Council on behalf of its ratepayers is paying $1 million a day in interest charges. $1 million. And there will be, and Fran has said that there'll be some winners and losers.
Well, I don't want to be one of the losers that's going to be paying 40% increase in their rates. And I've had this from the council, 3,734 ratepayers will see a 40% increase in their rates. You're going to see 110,000 with, see, I'm getting all excited now, thanks Trevor, I better get to that last page. I'm only on page 2. 120 will see 10 or 20%. That's not what we want here. I'm for smart democracy. I'm for smart change, smart progress. Thank you, Fran. I was quiet while you spoke. Please give me the courtesy. I support a region. I will support a prosperous region, and a proposal, this proposal in front of us, does none of that. Our region deserves the best, as it's been said, and a super city is not the answer.
Right, we're now going to have questions. And same story, Chris is going to read them out. I think he's going to try and get them so that they go sort of roughly to each side. We're going to work with individual teams to make sure that we get like one answer from the team, not a series of them. Most questions we won't need both teams to give an answer to. We'll only need one. And I'm going to run, to encourage people to be succinct, I'm going to run the timer and the timer will run for a minute. You don't need to take a minute to answer a question, but that's the maximum that you're allowed. Over to you, Chris.
All right, so I've selected from the questions, the first couple of questions I've selected are broadly representative of themes that many people have raised. So I'll ask one speaker from each side to comment on these first questions because they are broadly representative of quite a few of the questions that people have put in. So the first question is, if greater consistency in planning is one of the goals of amalgamation, why can't that be achieved through councils working better together now, or through government, through greater involvement of central government through things like policy statements under the RMA or even legislation? Why does council amalgamation need to happen for those things to take place?
From now on, I'll start it, not when you start answering, but when you get the question, right?
Actually, it's a good question. I similarly asked the same thing. Why couldn't we do it under the current structure? But what we've seen over the years is an inability to do it, because when push comes to shove, councils won't give away the ability to make decisions on a regional basis. They want to keep it local. And when it comes to planning, what we know is our needs are regional. If you look at the spatial plan for Auckland and the ability for the Auckland Council to make decisions really quickly, resource decisions, and engage with government on really big infrastructure and public transport questions, those things happen because it's one body having to make the decision. As we saw in Wellington, particular councils killed any chance with the Wellington Regional Strategy to actually make decisions on landform and growth because they wouldn't buy into a regional plan. That's what kills it.
While I might have agreed with Nick a number of years ago, the actual facts speak for themselves. This region has got its act together. We've now merged economic development, we've now merged water, we've now merged our emergency management. I believe this can be done, and sitting down with the commitment of the mayoral forum and the council, sitting down and doing this without throwing the baby out with the bath water. We can look at that. The actual facts speak for themselves. It said it couldn't be done with water. It's been done. It couldn't be done with economic development, and we've just now, only in the last couple of months, established a new economic development forum, which the lady that keeps talking over here to my right is actually I think the deputy chair of. So if she hasn't got confidence in the organisation, I have to wonder why is it that she puts herself forward for these roles.
All right, the second question, which again is broadly reflective of quite a number of questions or statements, in fact, that people wrote down. The majority of the speakers tonight are currently involved in Wellington local government. Is this proposal an admission that you cannot and are not working well together now?
the answer to that's clearly we are. The fact of the matter is that I can tell you the terms I've been near over the last 4 or 5 years, the regions never work more closely together. The only thing that will fracture this region is continual debate about a supercity. And that will hinder it. If you talk to the people in the Hawke's Bay, they went through that a few years ago and they said some of those divisions are still there. Yeah. So but from the point of view of the Wellington region, there's no reason whatsoever.
Yes, we do a lot of things well together, but there's a whole lot of things that we should be doing well together that we're not. It's important to talk about the water entity, Wellington Water. That's a front-end delivery organisation. All the assets are still owned by the councils, the individual councils. That means that all of the big spending decisions are made by the individual councils. That is not an amalgamation. That is not that is not actually the model that's going to work for Wellington. Hutt Valley, you've got half the vacant industrial land in the region. We all need to be able to help you fill that. We actually have got Wellington City wanting to put in a new greenfield site at Lincolnshire Farms with a population of 30,000. Is that going to help the Hutt Valley? No, it's not. We need to be able to do these things together as a region. So we're saying we can do better. We shouldn't just be sitting around saying, I'm all right, Jack.
Question number 3. Can the promoters assure us that the uncontrolled, i.e. non-elected, council-controlled organisations will not eventually, as in the Auckland Supercity, take over everything?
So this is a really good one because Fran and I are actually not pro-CCO people. In Auckland, I think is not great. You see that guy on the front page of the Herald on the weekend who was sent, Auckland's representative in London. That was a decision made by a CCO. It wouldn't have been made if the Auckland Council Chief Executive had that decision because he's directly accountable. We've heard tonight both Ray and Wayne talk about alternatives to the proposal we've got in front of us. We didn't hear any detail, but I do know a lot of the detail they talk about. What they mean is more CCOs tip everything into a company like Wellington Water, which is good because you have to cooperate. We were happy to cooperate, but all it does, it's an advice body. It's an extra layer of bureaucracy, and it is further away from communities' ability to influence it because it's got a private board, it's got a board of businessmen. So if you want that, everything, all the services tipped into regional companies, by all means, go for the alternative, go for status quo with a bit of change. But to me and to us, any large council of the region shouldn't have to have CCOs because it would be a big enough entity to administer those regional local services itself.
All right, we now move to questions for a couple of questions for either side. So for the people opposed to local government amalgamation, within an amalgamated authority there'd be potential for a well-resourced unified plan. Currently, territorial local authorities tend to under-resource district plan compliance. Why wouldn't the community be better off with only one authority and one plan?
That's a very good question, and can I just tell you that there's been a lot made about the spatial planning in Auckland, and that it's the panacea and that everyone has to actually follow it. What you might not know, and it's a very important fact, that I think it was 7 or 9 of the councillors actually wrote to the Prime Minister asking for the spatial plan process to cease because they felt it was getting out of control and not in line with the community. So I wouldn't hold that up as the particular great one. The other issue is that we've heard a lot about the boards, and I know Wayne and Nick have made quite a bit, and Fran has made quite a bit about the boards. At the end of the day, my Scottish heritage always says, read the fine print. And it's all subject to sign off by the major council. So if it's not in line with the major council's policy, there won't be any funding and there won't be any planning. Be assured of that.
All right. A question to the proponents. Youth councils in the Wellington region are weak and the only model allowing direct discourse with council by the under 25s. The Supercity model renders the current councils useless. How does this proposal assure and protect the youth voice in their own communities?
You've got the old guy to answer this one.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And what I think we get the opportunity for under the proposal is to have a reflection of youth identity and involvement at a local level, through local communities, and at a regional level. And once again, you're looking at education, skills and training on a regional basis as one particular issue, but also on a local basis. So I think there's actually the ability for strength and cooperation. So I see this as really exciting for young people. Can I also talk about Auckland? They've got an initiative there that the one council was able to put together, and that's called the Southern Initiative. And that is about looking at where the future workforce lives in what is now Auckland City, which is South Auckland. They're young, they are often living in low-income areas, and the council is putting resource, the whole council is putting resource to ensuring those kids have access to education and and workforce development, and ensuring that they're as healthy and as equipped as possible for their futures. And that's what we have the ability to do with a regional resource on these sort of issues. Get the politicians talking.
All right, we've had a lot of questions on debt. So if I could summarise that broadly, I think the tone of the questions on debt was, will this amalgamation proposal result in debts from one area being covered, or ratepayers in another area having to pay off the debts from one of the other areas? So perhaps if I could ask each side to have one speaker on that.
Come on, Fran.
Because I'm not a politician, but Chairman Mao said seek truth from facts. As far as debt's concerned, the proposal says that it looked very closely at the possibility of having a targeted rate, so that within the areas that had debt, that could be, the debt servicing could be targeted to that area. They rejected it on the basis that it was a much fairer proposal outcome to share the debt across the region. Yes, hang on, please hang on. Because, and also, there are assets against which debt and future debt will be serviced. Hutt City has no capital assets of any consequence. Upper Hutt doesn't either. They both have fairly low debt. Wellington City has more debt, but it has more capital assets and a greater ability to raise rates, to service rates, to meet those capital assets, which would become assets for the region.
Clearly, the proposal says that the debt will go across the whole region, and every ratepayer will pay their share. I mean, the fact of the matter is, remember, what intrigues me sometimes when you hear the proponents of the ones, there will still be the same number of ratepayers. It won't be developing another pool of money, but the fact of the matter is it's spread across the region.
All right, I've got a microphone. Here we go, we're back again. I've got a question that's been handed to me specifically for Fran, and that's around the number of people being employed by the Auckland City Council, which you mentioned has decreased. What has been the effect on the overall salary bill? Hasn't it just resulted in more highly paid managers?
The Auckland numbers of employees have gone down by 600 EFTs, that's effective full-time. That's the actual real count of numbers of staff. Interestingly, on day one, a lot of the councils were contracting out much of their services. North Shore had most of their services, I understand, contracted out. They pulled them back in-house again, and that would have been a saving in itself. I heard the number about the numbers of staff on 100,000 plus. I don't have a number on that, but I can tell you that in a market which is going absolutely crazy like Auckland at the moment, I suspect that salaries for the council to be competitive simply reflect the market that they're in. and Wellington is not like that. So I wouldn't imagine that would be anything like what's happening in Auckland with 1.5 million people and the growth that they are having there, which is phenomenal.
All right, next question.
Currently, about the last three, please, okay?
Currently, local councils are often forced into environmentally beneficial actions that are imposed by Greater Wellington consent. Under a unified council arrangement, how will the potential conflict between the needs of the environment and infrastructure managers' wishes be managed?
I think that goes back to you guys.
The environmental consents on that large scale and the infrastructure on a large scale would be managed regionally. So that would be managed at a regional level, not at a local level. I think the water CCO is a very interesting example of this, where they are already working closely with the regional council on the big consents and the new plan that we're developing, which Hutt obviously will be part of, and so will the rest of the region, and that's where they'll be resolved. So I don't see a problem with that. I think that that would be something that would be beneficial, actually, having them looking at the wider catchment rather than just a little part of the catchment, and having the big infrastructure providers being at the table and having to also understand the environmental needs, which are very big in Wellington.
All right, last question, because I've tried very much to summarise the overall tone of the questions, but this topic hasn't been mentioned yet, and that is for the proponents, if they could comment on the likely impact on the rates of rural residents within the region.
Councils have many different funding tools available, apart from rates. They have uniform annual charges, they have user charges, there are targeted rates, there are all sorts of different things. Depends on the rural differential, and I don't think anyone can say that now. But in terms of the previous discussion about rates and Auckland, I think it's really important to remember what I said earlier, that the big increases, and some were huge, were because the system of rating was changed from land value to capital value. Virtually everyone in the Wellington region is already on capital value. So those huge swings wouldn't be seen here. There were many people in Auckland who have also had rates decreases, as I said, but you never hear about them. So I think in terms of rating, Kapiti is the only one that's currently on land value, and there would be changes in Kapiti. But the rest of the rates would be, the changes will be far less. Rural differential depends on what the differential is, and the new council will decide that.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. We're now coming to the point where I think we say thank you very much to the people who've done the presentations and invite them to take chairs back at maybe at the front of the audience in a more listening mode, and it's the opportunity for people from the floor to have their say. What we're going to do is do it by moving around a bit. I'm going to have one mic, and I'll ask, which I'll mainly do people down the front. I'll ask Chris to do down the back. I'll ask the people who are controlling up there to watch out pretty quickly for my signal, because when people have had their minute, their mics are going to be turned off. Okay, because I think that's probably the way of doing it pretty fairly. Now, who'd like to start by making a comment? Yeah, have to stay there. Have to stay there. Right. I've got one down here first, Chris. If people can identify themselves and where they're from, we'll try and get a bit of a spread.
G'day, I'm Bob, I'm from Wainui. Now, we talk a lot about rate increases. Fran mentioned 9% increase. We talk about ratepayers paying their share. There's a pool of ratepayers that's not going to change. Well, then why is it that the ratepayers and the homeowners should be the only ones who should have a say whether we want Supercity or don't want Supercity, because we're paying for the bloody thing? And I feel that other people, they're just coming along for the ride. Therefore, it's up to the ratepayers and the homeowners to say yes or no in the story.
Right, we will ask people to stand up.
Yeah, Martin from Upper Hutt. Well, just from the meeting tonight, I got the feeling that something's already been decided here. You talk about the water being a commodity and that, so is it earmarked for sale? Are you going to sell the water, to a private enterprise? And that's a major concern because we all need water. Are there going to be water meters and everything placed around? So what Jim Bolger said, it won't be another tax, it'll be a surcharge. So your rates won't go up, but you'll be just charged another surcharge. There's lots of questions on that you guys just haven't answered tonight, and quite dismal about the meeting actually. I feel like it's already been decided. You talk too about another 30,000 people being earmarked in some place in Lower Hutt. Well, it sounds to me like you've already had the discussions, you've already talked about this, and whatever we're doing here, that doesn't matter. The Commission's going to make a ruling, and that'll be it. I mean, you're just getting like government. They haven't listened to us for the last 20 years either.
To a Beveridge Western Community Committee. Fran, I'm really intrigued as to why you're sabotaging your own regional council, because they wouldn't exist under a Supercity. And actually, I think they're doing a sterling job. I'm not actually, in the past, I haven't been a big fan of regional, but over 4 or 5 terms, I've realised they do an amazing job in terms of floodway, in terms of regional council management, and we really don't understand how these land management boards and how the Maori boards will work. So, I don't think we've had much beyond rhetoric from your side of the team.
I've been involved in the Hutt City's debates around there, my good friend Councillor Wallace. We actually agree with each other now. But what happened in the old days when Hutt City was established, we developed a holistic approach to funding. And we actually, it took 2 years when the amalgamation took place to actually bring rates down. So how many years is it going to take if we do amalgamate to bring rates down? The other point I want to make, and I'm very passionate about, why do you people think you have the right to take away the legal status from Hutt City of local authority? And we won't have councillors, but we will have board members.
Hi, I'm Casey. I haven't lived in the Hutt Valley all my life yet because I haven't had much of a life yet. But look at all these people. All these people, a lot of them have lived in the Hutt all their life. They've lived in Hutt all their life. They've paid their taxes. They've paid their rates. They've paid to play. And now you want to go around and just change it all. You want it all changed, and it's not clear how you want to change it. And one day I'm going to have a family. And I want to pay reasonable taxes. I want to pay reasonable rates. I want them to have the best opportunity possible. And I'm sorry, but I have not been convinced to put my future family in the hands of number crunchers and people who have been in the job for only 3 weeks. I would suggest to put that in the hands of people who have lived in lives all their lives and have worked hard, worked the 40-hour weeks, worked in construction, in butcheries, lived there. I'm not going to put it in the hands of people who are going to throw numbers at me. I'm going to put it in the hands of people that actually do the hard work.
Yes.
Just before we go to the next one, can we just remember that Emma came here, for some of the came to fill in someone else to give us information. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Jones. I know how Auckland infrastructure works. I work with them all the time. It's not working. It's costing a fortune. They keep saying it works. It doesn't work. They've got no money. They keep borrowing money. Who's going to pay the money back? That's what's going to end up happening here if we're going to go along the same lines as they're doing in Auckland. We have to be careful what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. Just have a good look at what's happening in Auckland.
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm from the West Youth Advisory, we're an independent youth advisory, and the Hutt Valley. I'm also Trevor's former youth MP, and Lord knows we don't agree on some things, but this is what we do. And I've got to say, if there's anything we all know here, it's that a Wellingtonian certainly cannot run the Hutt Valley. I mean, it is hard enough as a young person. 25% of the city is under 25, and it is so hard, I'm sorry Ray, but to get to the council and get our opinions heard. How hard is it going to be when we've got a council full of people who aren't even from here to have an issue like secret level discussed, level-handedly with our opinions presented? It's not going to happen.
Exactly.
We don't want to be cleaning up the mess of the local government commission in 20 years and we have to take the reins from you.
I'm glad someone in the audience acknowledged Māoridom. The only thing I support with the Supercity is you're looking at setting up a Māori council, but hey I still don't support the Supercity. I'm from Wainemata, and we know exactly how it feels to be amalgamated. We totally got de-amalgamated and lost all our funds that was used, like our tip for instance. Lots of things I can do. Lucky, Ray, that you've come on board as the mayor. We've never had so much roading done in all the 26 years that we've been done. Sorry, we've done. I'm just saying, amalgamation means de-amalgamation because they don't know how it works. Kia ora tātou katoa.
Hello, my name's Jenny Sands. I'm from the Hutt Community Group, and I'm also speaking as an independent person. I was born in the Hutt, but I haven't lived here for many, many years, but I come and go. Part of the Hutt had a meeting and we talked about these proposals. We see them as part of the future. We see them as a plan for the next 25 to 30 years. We're interested in them. We discuss them seriously. A number of us have read the proposals carefully. I don't agree that they're not clear. An enormous amount of work has gone into these proposals by the Commission, and I commend the Commission for them, whether you agree with them or not. Our meeting broadly agreed with the proposals in terms of the spatial planning issues, in terms of the challenges, the regional challenges of climate change, in terms of the challenge of population demographics, where Upper Hutt and Lower Hutt are both going to have ageing populations. But most of all, it was because these proposals represented to us vision and voice. We believe Lower Hutt desperately needs a higher standard of debate at council level. It needs to hear from a greater variety of views across the council, and we believe that this proposal, which we're not uncritical of, but we believe this proposal represents the future, and we would broadly support it. Thank you.
Last two commenters.
Okay, Michael Ellis, I live over in Fairfield and I'm on the Council's Eastern Community Committee. I just wanted to make the point, when we think of around the world of vibrant cities we'd like to emulate, you think of cities like London, Melbourne, Sydney and the like. It might surprise people, the city of Melbourne has 77,000 residents, that's the local council, and that's a vibrant, modern city. All these cities have one thing in common, they are all represented locally and they work together to create those global cities. This is an opportunity, I think, for us to say, yes, we want to be a great city. We don't have to amalgamate to do that. The evidence overseas is when you amalgamate, you just stuff things up.
Ian's my name, Wainemata. Can we just have a show of hands for Emma's information on who's in favour of a super city just consisting of Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt, as opposed to everything altogether? In other words, the big super city that we're talking about.
What Ian's asking is, are there people in the room who would prefer just to amalgamate two Hutt councils?
Yes.
What about asking if we don't want that?
Yeah.
Very last one.
confirmed further my fears of the Supercity.
Can we get that mic on?
Is that better?
No.
There we are. It's just the information that's been given just further confirms my fears about this whole process, and it also, in a way, has spurred me to want to take action. And I heard some people saying that people are mobilising to collect signatures to try and stop this process. Where can I sign up? Because I have about 4 words for the pro side of this campaign, and I hope it won't come to this, but quite frankly, over my dead body.
Can I testing?
You're not on.
You turn it off here.
Not turning the love.
How's that?
Testing? Right, going now, thank you. Right, what we're going to do now is, because we do have a time limit on the place and we've got a whole pile of people who had their hands up to give opinions, and it sounds like they especially want to give their opinions to the people who are behind me and the people who are over there. I'm going to do a reminder that there is a box over there for submission forms. Reminder of the process. Submissions go in. The Commission has options of going ahead with a proposal, of amending the proposal, or of abandoning the proposal. And I think if people made their preferences clear as part of the submission process, that would be good. People have the option of appearing before the commissioners in support of their submission to amplify what they think and why in order to get their voices heard in front of the Commission. What appears to be the evidence from around the place, from discussions that I've had with quite a range of people, with the surveys that have been done, and there are ongoing surveys, including, I understand, a relatively new Wellington City Council one that's going to come out over the next day, which show pretty overwhelming opposition to the proposal that is there. But if people don't make that clear to the Commission, then they are more likely to go ahead with the proposal that they've got. So please don't start collecting signatures for a referendum. Wait until there is a final proposal, and you have my undertaking that if it is anything like the current proposal, then there will be a big team of people who will work hard to get the signatures for a referendum in order to make sure that it doesn't happen. But frankly, a lot of us have got better things to do with our time. We prefer not to have the expense of a referendum, which our councils end up covering. We prefer not to have the process go on in that way. So let's do what we should, have our say, and that way, hopefully, the process won't go on, at least in its current form. Can I thank our speakers very much for coming? The local government commission in particular. It's not the officials' fault that this proposal has come out. It is the commissioner's fault. And Basil's an old friend of mine. I would have preferred to have him here because it's his fault and he should have been here. But we've got the officials, and that's fair enough. Thank you to the proponents for the scheme. You haven't had the easy audience that the opponents have had. It's pretty clear that you're on a bit of a hiding to nothing in coming, and I want to thank you for coming into the Lion's Den. I also want to thank Chris for giving his perspective as a local businessman, and our two mayors, who you know, I've been around a bit, but I think no time in my memory, have we had in the Hutt two mayors who are so good and have worked together so well. Thank you. But most of all, thank all of you for turning out. What I'm going to ask people to do is to now move out into the area out there so we can do some tidying up, have a bit of discussion if you want to. We're told that the doors have to be locked by 9:30. Thank you very much.